Pete gave the second installment of the Great Co-Mission yesterday. And so, we are going to do this podcast, and then we get to start a family vacation.
It's going to be the closest
Amazing,
to heaven.
Awesome, spectacular.
Fantastic. Maybe I could fast forward. Maybe we're sitting in the house as a family right now listening to this together.
Perhaps.
Hello, family.
We are so excited.
We're grateful to be here. We're happy together.
No, we are.
Yeah.
It's going to be good.
It's going to be really great.
We're heading to the beautiful, majestic, serene space of Temecula.
Wine country.
That's where we're going. Yes. You don't drink wine, though, do you?
No, my kids do.
Yikes. Okay. So yesterday, now that we have underage drinking from our pastor's kids, that's great. We jumped in the second round of the Great Commission. And I'm just going to start off by just asking you, why do you think we call it the Great Commission? Is it because it's great in its nature of the scope, or great in terms of the opportunity to be a part of it?
I have no idea.
I stumped him.
Well, I mean,
No.
it's obviously not in the Bible itself. At some point, a lot of times when you read your Bible, there'll be like little headings or subheadings. Those are just added later by people who are editing, putting the Bible together to help you make sense of it. At some point, somebody probably just labeled that. I would assume it's great because of how big it is.
Yeah.
Important, huge, massive scope. I would think so. But
Yeah.
being involved is great too.
I wasn't involved personally as much in the formation of this series because I'm on vacation.
Okay. Right.
So I was curious. A lot of this is talking about partnership and joining in the Great Commission. So when I was thinking about just that title, Great Commission, whether or not like just a part of it is helping to help people see how exciting it is and what a great opportunity to be a part of God's mission.
I think what's funny, and we really kind of had this, it was literally a conversation that was happening as we were even working through like graphics and things, because the word commission doesn't literally mean co-mission.
Right.
To commission someone means to give them an assignment to send them out. We were more trying to play on the words, using co as like we're on a mission with God. We're just trying to be silly or clever with words, I guess, trying to be creative, I suppose. But yeah, I don't know where great comes from.
Okay.
I've never thought about it. So,
Okay.
it's a good question.
All right. Well, if you know, put it in the comments. I guess let us know.
In 847, Pope Leo the 19th, I could say that and everyone would be like, oh, interesting. And no one would know I'm just making it up.
Yeah, I would. If you'd have went there, I would have been like, wow, I didn't know that.
Okay,
That's cool.
Great. Wow.
So one of the things that it seems like that we're advocating is that all people in terms of who have given their lives to following Jesus are to embrace this Great Commission and to be a part of making disciples of all nations. Meaning that when we read Matthew 28, that we look at it in terms of being more of a prescriptive passage.
Sure.
Right? Prescriptive saying all people are doing it versus descriptive saying this is what Jesus just said to the 11, which in Matthew 28, it says that he's speaking to the 11 disciples and he tells them to go make disciples. So I guess my question is, how do we know it's prescriptive? How do we know that every single person who's a follower of Jesus is somehow supposed to be a part of this Great Commission versus just those disciples initially?
I would say we don't. There's people that disagree with that. I actually was part of a group of guys that kind of all did our doctorate studies together. We all picked a topic that we were going to focus on and write about. And one of the guys that I became pretty good friends with, his kind of thesis for his whole doctorate was, I don't think the Great Commission is for everyone.
Oh, wow.
And it was fun because it gave us a lot of things to discuss over the course of like 4 years. We oftentimes would meet together and sort of hash it out a little bit, talk about it. What I think eventually happened, even, I don't want to put words in his mouth or anything, but I did read his final thesis before he published. What ended up kind of happening was, as the more that we talked, the more I sort of tried to unpack what he was saying and reading what he was trying to get at. It became clear that what he was really arguing for was less about whether the Great Commission was for everybody and more about whether everyone is supposed to be an evangelist, which I kind of, yesterday was something I touched on a little bit. It sort of been coming from some of that, of like that I even would push back on him at times. And I think eventually he changed it in his final thesis. Like, the Great Commission is not evangelism. Evangelism is part of the Great Commission. So if you want to argue that we're not all evangelists, I could see that in Scripture. But to say that we're not all part of the Great Commission, you could nuance the text. Well, right here, he's talking to the 11. The problem, just on a base level with that, there are many things that Jesus said that he was only talking to the 11.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he was only talking to a group of, 40 or 50 people when he said, you've heard it said, do not commit murder. I say, don't even hate. Like, well, he was only talking to those people. Well, no, the reason that we have the teachings of Jesus in the Scripture are because they are meant for his followers. And you can get into a few of the specifics. Well, what about when he said, Peter, I've given you the keys to the kingdom, whatever. Was that just for Peter? Was everybody? There are some places that I think are maybe a little harder. But for me, I mean, this section in Matthew just seems to fit with everything that Jesus just taught and said, if you're a follower of me, I'm speaking to you. This is for all of you that are going to follow. But I mean, people that want to make that case, I see it. I don't personally believe it.
So then other passages in the Bible, and this is a passage that I've personally come back to mainly because my wife has found comfort and kind of solace in this passage. How do we reconcile the Great Commission with a passage like 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verses 11 through 12, which says, make it your ambition to lead a quiet life, and that your daily life, it says to do this, it says, make it your ambition to lead a quiet life, that you should mind your own business and work with your hands, just as we have told you, so that your daily life may win the respect of outsiders, and so that you will also not be dependent on anybody. And my wife, the reason I said it's been a source of comfort is because you kind of alluded to this yesterday, like, she's not the one who's wanting to, like, just cold turkey go and talk to someone and strike up a conversation. But it seems like there's an advocation here by Paul to lead a quiet life. And it does have this notion of, like, to win the respect of outsiders, but it just doesn't seem like it goes hand in hand with the Great Commission to make disciples, all nations, baptizing them, teaching them. Oh, and also make it your ambition to lead a quiet life. Like, maybe just speak to that. Is that an extrovert, introvert thing? Is that like how we've heard it presented from the Great Commission is more an evangelistic thinking process, but it's actually, no, you got to look at the whole scope of this. Like,
I think yeah, it's a good question. And honestly, people that maybe listen to the podcast regularly are probably feel like we've touched on these themes before, and it's okay. I was actually thinking when I was working on this message, like, this thought really was sort of present in my mind. I think sometimes one of the roles that I play on our teaching team is representing a different type of person than you and Robert, and even when Matt was more part of the team. And I don't mean like a good or a bad, but just a different. And we use words like introvert and extrovert, and those get to it, but I think you can unpack it even more. Like, and call it extroversion, or just call it the way that somebody's generally wired. There is a tendency, I think, to whatever a person's personality is, to talk about something like the Great Commission through the lens of their personality. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think what is good is that we have different personalities, both presenting different sides of it. And one thing I was thinking about, and I know this sounds like a tangent, but I was last night I just kind of went for a walk and it was in my brain. The phrase comfort zone sometimes gets thrown around. And I think at its purest form, what the word comfort zone means is what it is. But the way that it often gets used today is you need to step out of your comfort zone. That oftentimes gets applied to the Great Commission. Get out of your comfort zone. Go do something, be radical, move to China, get out of your comfort zone, talk to strangers. And one of the things that people like me, and people, I guess, have heard me talk enough to know what I'm talking about is people like me. I often hear that, and I think people that tell me to get out of my comfort zone are usually people that are actually in their own comfort zones. And really what they're saying, when they say that they're out of their comfort zone, they're just saying they're doing things that are outside of what they see being my comfort zone. But they're actually in their comfort zone. Like the people that that feel driven to do those kind of things, they're comfortable doing those kind of things because they're wired for it. The person that quits his or her job and moves to Nepal and lives in the mountains probably has something inside of them that's exciting and adventurous that God probably put there because he wanted them to do it. So if that person looks at the person that wants to live a quiet life and stay home, be like, you need to get out of your comfort zone. It's like, I almost just want to, and I do this a lot. I kind of want to like flip the script and I want to look at that person and say, how about you get out of your comfort zone and you go take a vow of silence and live in a monastery for 6 months? Oh, because that would be out of your comfort zone. And the reality is, although we can use the phrase comfort zone to speak of choosing to be too selfish or only focus on myself and I need to get out. Yes. But if we're using it in the sense of like getting out of or moving out of what I'm good at and comfortable at and where I thrive, I think that's a mistake. And so if the Great Commission is only for people who are either like that or people that have to get out of their comfort zone, it's a big problem because all of these people are trying to do something that they're not wired for, they're not good at. And I personally just philosophically can't believe that's true. I can't believe that God would create two different types of people and say, these people are perfectly wired for it. For these people, it's going to be torture or whatever, but you all got to go do it. So it's caused me to reflect and look at something like the Great Commission and step back and say, maybe part of the problem is we're making this a one size fits all rather than a multifaceted, diverse process that involves all different kinds of people. And that you can be a person who is called and comfortable living more of a quiet life and not being the person that's, jumping on airplanes and things and still be involved in the process of making disciples because that quiet life is still impacting other people. You're still finding ways to serve the bigger team and things. And I just think there's a place for everybody. And there's a place for Pauls guys like Paul,
What's interesting, because Paul's the one who wrote this. That seems like he's probably encouraging people to live what's outside of his own.
That would probably be very uncomfortable for him.
Paul, like, I don't want to live a quiet life.
Well, he's like, I don't even want to get married. I just want to go. But if you want to get married and stay home and have babies, fine, do that. Like, there's times you got to and it's not a bad thing. There's just times you got to understand who Paul is when you're writing these letters. Like, he is the guy that today would be jumping out of airplanes and things. So if he looks at me and says, Pete, you're out of your comfort zone, I'd be like, well, you're in your comfort zone. You're probably wired this way. And that's okay. It's good.
Yeah, because that's when you're saying like the make it your ambition to live a quiet life. Paul wrote that. He didn't make that his ambition.
Not at all. Not
at all.
No. And I think, he was probably, and to be honest, I haven't read First Thessalonians in a little while. I'd have to go back and study it. But I think there was also the tension of there's probably another dynamic at play, which was are Christians being obnoxious and creating problems. And calm down. You don't need to be so about this. But I do think that what I wanted to do yesterday, and it was intentional, sometimes it's not intentional, but it was intentional yesterday, is I wanted to act as a sort of counterbalance, not opposed, but counterbalance to Robert. Because the week before, and it's so natural, like Robert exudes just passion and enthusiasm. Robert is the guy that just wants to go and go and go and go. And I love that about him. And I love the fact that the church and our team has people like him. But if you're not like him, sometimes it can also, you almost and I've told, he and I are really good friends. Like people like me almost can feel like anxiety when he talks. It's like, oh, I don't, that's not who I am. And it can lead me to feel like there's no place for me. It can lead me to feel like, well, the Great Commission is just for those people. I don't have a role in this. It's like, no, you do. We all do. And finding my role has been my own journey in my life. And so being able to sometimes get on a stage and give a perspective that maybe is speaking to some of the people that have my thoughts or fears or insecurities or anxieties, I don't want to do it all the time, but to
Yeah.
me, it was an opportunity to put some of that out there this week.
So kind of staying in the same vein then with comfort zones, you kind of mentioned yesterday the notion of baptizing people and then teaching them to obey. And you used the reference kind of like your wife thrives in the realms of baptizing, and she's just really out there with people, and whether she was a Christian or not, that's just how she's wired. Like she's just going to interact with people, and you kind of fall more in the line of teaching to obey. That's a gifting that you have. So maybe you say like your comfort zone is in that teaching realm. And so I guess my question is, as someone like yourself who has a doctorate degree, anyone that's listened to you knows that you're highly intelligent. When it comes to making disciples, how much should someone first know before they begin engaging in the Great Commission? Like, are there some baseline things that you think people should know before they just jump into it, or because you value that education, that's a sweet spot for you, or is it like, no, just learn as you go and who cares? Like, but are there some things that they need to be educated in first?
I think what I talked about yesterday, there are people who are very knowledgeable and learned who might push back and be like, Pete, I don't know if I agree with everything you said. And that's okay. It's safe to say that yesterday, maybe even more than most days, was probably a healthy dose of Pete Goodman's opinion. I probably, in retrospect, should have done a better job of saying, there are people that disagree with what I'm saying right now. I'm coming from so there are those who might push back and say, Pete, the person serving in the nursery is not making disciples. They're just the person, greeting at the door is not part of the Great Commission. The Great Commission is this and this, they're just serving. And if someone pushed back on me that I might be like, well, I see where you're coming from, I guess theologically in the Bible, whatever. This is what I believe. I believe that making disciples is a team effort. And even if you're brand new, there's a role that can be played. Even if you aren't even, here's the crazy thing, even if you haven't fully crossed the line, there's a role that you can play. Because, to me, it's all connected. And I think I literally threw out the example of the security team. You're like, what does the security team have to? Well, it's all connected because we have a group of guys who are making a decision to come every week and stand guard and keep us safe. The outflow of that is other people who are trying to check this thing out, who are trying to decide whether Christianity is interesting, maybe come to a church service and someone with the gift of teaching is on the stage explaining the Bible to them, but because they feel safe and they feel like I'm protected here, I'm comfortable here, like they're willing to listen to me more. And so is that person who's serving on the security team making disciples? Well, they're not preaching. Well, am I making disciples just because I'm talking? We're all a team member. Yeah. And because we have all these amazing people in the kids ministry, both the kids are getting ministered to, but the parent also feels like, this is a good place. I feel like my kids are okay and I can sit here and listen, and suddenly I'm open to what you're telling to me. I'm not worried about my kids. Or maybe I came here just because I heard you're good with kids. And I don't care about Jesus, but I'll bring my kids here because they want to come. And then they sit in that chair on a random Sunday and you say something that just clicks with them. Like, we're all in this together. Like, my ability to teach, and I would even say this, so we do this thing called Rise U on Tuesday nights. And I get up and the last couple of weeks I've been, here's an hour and a half information on church history. I'm teaching, but a bunch of other people are setting up all those chairs and tables, are putting up flyers, are and it's so easy to point at the person on the stage and be like, oh, like I kind of use like, oh, that's James Bond or something. But it's like, I'm worthless if all these other people aren't coming together and doing it with me.
Yeah.
And, in maybe like more personal lives, one thing that's cool is you brought up my wife, and it's been neat to see that my wife's gifting is often just, she just meets people at the beach, like, hey, come on over for pizza, and I'm not that person, but I am somebody that if you're in my house and you're sitting down having pizza with me, let's have a conversation. And so I can engage people who I probably never would have engaged with had my wife not been so outgoing and so her and I are almost a team, you might say, in our own way. of some of the best conversations I've had with people who are seeking or looking for faith or things have come because my wife has invited them into our home.
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of like a smaller picture of the church at large.
Yeah. So how do you then go about, because you mentioned also yesterday to not essentially measure success in a weekly tally of how many disciples have I made? Like that's first just can just produce a ton of guilt.
A lot, yeah.
But are there some ways, or would you recommend, like, what are some ways to gauge success in terms of making disciples or being engaged in the Great Commission, just for people wanting to know, like, hey, am I actually on track and moving in the direction that God wants me to go here? And how do I tell if I am really making disciples or not? Is there anything that you can look at or point to say yes or no, or this is a healthy movement forward?
Man, that's a good question. You and I work for a church. So I think the way that you and I might answer that question would be different than someone who doesn't. Because as people that work for a church, we can say, well, let's look at, we use this word metrics. Let's look at the metrics of our church. Let's look at attendance and baptisms and things like that. But the reality is, and we have to admit this, if Rise City Church has 20 people that get baptized at one event, and we'd be like, oh, right, baptize 20 people. What does that even mean in terms of me as a person, right? Can I be like, well, actually 2 of those people I had coffee with once, so do they count for me? Or what happens if I go to a baptism service at the beach or something and we baptize 12 people and I've literally never talked to any of them? Am I like, well, I'm failing the Great Commission?
No way, man. That counts for us. We get gold stars in heaven for that one.
Well, but here's the thing. This is, okay, I'm going to clarify. I'm giving my opinion here. I'm not basing this on scripture. This is my opinion. If you and I get credit for that, then anybody serving at Rise City should get credit for that.
I agree.
The fact that I get a paycheck doesn't make me better than somebody else. In fact, me getting a paycheck, honestly, means it should count less for me. It's my job. The people who are doing it on their free time and giving up a day off, let's just be honest, I'm not giving up a day off to come and serve the church. I work on Sundays. I have the least reward of all of this.
You've already been rewarded.
Yeah. The person that's saying Monday, or I could be sleeping in on Sunday and just watching football, but instead I'm going to show up here and serve to help other people come to know Jesus. When they're standing on the sand, looking out into the water and seeing people get baptized, even if they don't know who that person is, they're part of this team, and this team is winning. It's not an individual. And so I think when we try to make individual tallies, and I don't want to point people out, but I've experienced that in my life. Someone being like, oh, I've led 10 people to the Lord. And oftentimes what they mean is they happen to be the person who got to pull the ear of corn off the stalk. But it's did they plant it? Did they water it? Who knows what led up to the moment that they had a conversation and that person said yes. There's so many people involved. And for me, what I've had to do, and I guess we could say this is different for everybody, but I had to ask myself the question, not how many people can I put on a tally and how many whatever. I had to ask myself, am I doing what God has asked me to do? Because when I stand before him, and I think people would disagree with me on this, and that's okay. I don't believe that Jesus is going to look at me and say, how many people did you baptize? He's not going to say, how many spiritual conversations did you have with lost people? I think he's going to say, did you do what I asked you to do? Well done, good and faithful servant. And so I regularly in my life have to be asking that question.
Yeah.
Am I doing what he's asking me to do? And for a person that maybe is just starting out, maybe what he's asking them to do is, hey, just put that lanyard on and greet people at the door. But then maybe a year later, he's like, you know what? It's time to go lead a life group.
Yeah.
Or, hey, get involved in the kids' men. Or, hey, maybe I'm calling you to more and you need to go to seminary. Or,
right.
Have you talked to your neighbor? Whatever. I think that you as an individual, listening wherever you're listening, asking yourself the question, am I being faithful to what God has asked me to do? Is the tally, is the scorecard.
Yeah.
I mean, we are saved by faith. So am I being faithful? Not how many souls can I put my name to?
Yeah. That's good. Yeah. It sounds like just, can you at least see that you're engaged to some capacity and being faithful to take those next steps will be.
And that was my last slide when I spoke yesterday. My basic question: how are you serving the team?
Yeah.
How are you involved? I can absolutely say if you are not involved, then you're not serving. But how are you involved?
Yeah.
Get involved, and then let your involvement grow as you grow and finding new ways. And I that's the way God works.
Yeah. All right, so I got two more questions. One related to this, another one's going to be kind of just to finish off. It's a little bit of a little different direction, but in terms of Rise City Church, right? You talked about you're on staff here, you work here, get a paycheck here. What would your assessment be of how well or not well we're doing at encouraging and equipping people here at Rise City to carry out the Great Commission? And in your opinion, what should we be doing or not doing if this is what we're advocating in the Great Commission? So if you had a quick, hey, here's an evaluation of Rise City Church, because most people watching this come here and they're hearing us tell people to do the Great Commission. Do you think as a church currently, we're doing a good job of encouraging and equipping people to do this? Or do you think we should still maybe add or help in to become better at it if this is the thing that we're supposed to engage our lives in?
It's like recording a staff meeting and putting it out to the world to listen to. It's great. Why not? So bringing things back to personalities, I am who I am. I think the way I think, and therefore I'm passionate about what I'm passionate, and I feel called to what I'm called to. As someone who maybe feels more called to the teaching side, I feel fairly comfortable in how well we do that. And moment of truth, I guess, or transparency, I think what's hard is being that I'm not the guy that's quite as, I don't personally get any joy out of big citywide events, and they stress me out. I can say that objectively, up until maybe a little more recently, probably with Robert joining our team and getting more involved, we've probably shied away from that maybe a little too much. And I think it's partly been personality. I think with you, as regardless of your bent, you are sort of entrusted with sort of running the whole organization. And so it's hard to really, for you, I think, to push in certain specific areas. And so you've had someone like me, and I can push on, hey, we need some classes, let's, things like that. But not having someone who maybe has carried the call, who is called to be an evangelist, really push us in those areas. And I do think that I'm hopeful, because as long as if you asked me to do that and you put me in charge of it, we would fail, because you would be asking me to work outside of my comfort zone. But I think we have some people now who that is their comfort zone, who that is their wiring, who God has said, I'm making you, and here's what I'm making you for. Yeah. And I think moving forward, it's probably a good time for Rise to start saying, we need to lean into that more. Pete's doing some good classes, life groups are going well over here, but we need to start leaning into this more. I would say we're probably a little weak on the proclamation side outside of a Sunday morning church service in terms of the way that we're both helping people know how to talk to their neighbors, but also doing things outside of the church that maybe we did a lot of at the beginning. Yeah. Yeah. And in truth, I say that kind of I'm more comfortable not doing that kind of stuff, but I also know it needs to happen.
Well, I know if Robert's listening to this, you just made him so excited. Yeah. And he's going to have a list in front of me in the next day and a half of all the things that we're going to be doing. So,
but that's the beauty of the team. And it's one of the reasons why, I don't know, it's just funny. Robert and I are so different. I mean, obviously, physically, we're very different.
What do you mean?
Well, he's a small Asian man, and I'm a huge ogre. I don't know. But even in the way that we're wired and what we're passionate about. Yeah. And it's I think in some ways, he and I are such a good picture of how, and my wife and Robert have the same Enneagram number. I don't know what it is. I'm drawn to 7s or something. But the picture of it is the differences that make us stronger.
Yeah.
And the way that we'll best accomplish this great commission is by leveraging everyone's unique skill set and unique opportunities and unique stories, and not trying to make one person feel like they have to do everything. Because that's just, it's not only, it's a heavy, anxious guilt trip, but it's also ineffective.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to see what Robert wants to do with Rise and direction in that area.
Awesome. Well, this last question will maybe dovetail a little bit off of that one. But so if we were to move more in the realms of proclamation, being more engaged maybe in the community and those types of things, looking at the Great Commission, maybe it's kind of the baptizing side versus the teaching to obey side. I'm curious, how does the Great Commission, do you believe it does? How does it potentially speak to and answer the national division we are experiencing right now? Like, I think for some people, we look at this country and there's tons of talk as far as the division, the frustration, heightened levels of anxiety, stress, anger, always more episodes of that anger overflowing into violent acts. I mean, and people, when they evaluate the future of the United States of America, they're like, ew, like consumer confidence isn't high right now. Does the Great Commission offer any solution to that? Not that it's like the goal of the Great Commission is to make America better. That's not what I'm saying. But when I'm probably baiting a little bit of this question because I've been hearing this series through the lens of, I think this is potentially the greatest answer to what we're experiencing as a nation of division. But I'm curious, like, how do you think the Great Commission plays into just the national climate right now?
Well, it's definitely a merging of belief with, like, basic belief. What do I actually believe? Meeting pragmatism and reality in my brain. Those two things collide sometimes in really odd ways. And I think they do for you. I've talked to you about that, where I can say, I really do believe this is true, but I'm also so much of sometimes just a realist. I'm like, I absolutely 100% that believe that the message of Jesus is the hope of the world.
Yeah.
And that the problems that we're in, you know, and somebody's like, well, it's sin. I'm like, well, of course it's sin. But what exactly are you saying when you're saying that? It's sin or some force in the world. Like, it is people making choices that don't align with how God intended them to live and treat each other. And if human beings treated each other the way that Jesus taught us to treat each other, I mean, what would the world look like? It would be much closer to paradise. You know, a message of choosing to forgive and not fight back is like, and I kind of did a mess on it a couple weeks ago, but like, what is the ultimate root of this division, if not people being angry and fighting back? You push me, I push you back harder, and you do this, I do it back harder, and we just keep going back and forth. It gets worse and worse, rather than just choosing to love and forgive and let things go. I would say a lot of the things that anger people are also rooted in things that aren't true. The message of Jesus brings truth.
Yeah.
And so accepting the lordship of Jesus means accepting his worldview and his truth. And a lot of the tension in our world today is people fighting over things that, like, what is or isn't true? Like, is it true that it's okay to, you know, kill babies, or men becoming women, or all these different kind of things? We're wrestling with these things because we don't agree on truth. And so a message that is both choosing to love each other in the ways that Jesus taught, but also choosing Jesus' truth. Yes, I mean, of course, I inherently believe that if I could snap my finger and make every American accept Jesus as Lord of their lives, that the world would be a better place. I'm way too much of a pragmatist to think that would ever happen this side of Jesus returning. But I think we can make a difference.
Yeah.
And so to not do it, to just throw my hands up and say, it's too big, I can never do anything about it. Well, that's not the answer.
Yeah.
But also say for Christians, we're part of the problem. we we love to fight and argue ourselves. And the thing about the Great Commission is when you really let it sink in, there's no way to look at the Great Commission with any kind of selfishness if you really look at it, And anything you're doing, if you're doing it selfishly, I mean, the only people who could make the Great Commission selfish, let's just be honest, are us. Because our jobs could potentially, if more people became Christians, we have a bigger church and make more money, whatever. Pastors can be selfish about the Great Commission, but the average person has no selfish motive to right? Why do this? And so by engaging the Great Commission, I am choosing to look beyond myself.
Yeah.
I am choosing to walk this path that Jesus called me to be humble and love others enough to serve and help them find a new way. And so I think pushing the Great Commission more on the church is pushing a level of humility and self-sacrifice and self-denial, pushing us to love others more than ourselves. So yeah, and then I think every human being that comes to accept Jesus is making the world better and making their lives better.
Yeah.
But clearly, I would say you have some thoughts. What are you thinking?
My only thought was I just been, people are kind of getting really frenetic about things and frantic, and they're just like, what are we going to do? And it's like, I think it was JFK that said in his inaugural address, ask not what your country can do for you, but ask what you can do for your country.
Yeah.
Right. And so and a lot of times now what's advocated is to protest, to legislate, to post, to cancel culture, all that kind of stuff. And for followers of Jesus, it's or just take the Great Commission seriously. That might be the best contribution I can make to my country by choosing a few people to invest in, to learn and to apply and to live out the ways of Jesus. And then those people do likewise, and those people do likewise. And the multiplication effect of that over the course of time will bring betterment to society. But if we ourselves are not, as Christians, engaged in the Great Commission, but we're more interested in the canceling or the legislating or the protesting or whatever it might be, it's the answer is right there in front of us. And we just don't think of it because it's oh no, that's that thing that you spiritually in churches is no, that can change a nation. It can change a family. It can change a neighborhood. And I just been challenged even the first couple weeks of the series to say, I care about my neighborhood. I care about this community. I care about our church. I care about this country. Therefore, the greatest thing that I can do in helping, right, and what I can do for these entities is to be a part of the Great Commission.
I'm thinking I wonder, you can tell me this. Did you send me that? Oh, Levi, the Jordan Peterson video you sent.
Oh yeah. I've watched it, but I didn't send it to you. But yeah.
Yeah, Jordan Peterson is how would you even describe it? He's become this odd hero to Christians.
Really 38 minutes? Oh man, we are the longest podcast ever. Sorry, keep going. What about Jordan Peterson?
Now I brought up Jordan Peterson, so we'll be here for an hour.
Oh my gosh.
Well, Jordan Peterson has become a hero to a lot of Christians,
yeah.
Which is odd. I guess he has maybe some religious background, I don't know. But the video that you sent was him basically a message to Christians,
Yeah.
And it was very, about young men and challenging them and things. And at the end, he made a statement, and I just, there's a part of me that as I was listening to him, it was I didn't know how to feel about it because I had this tension where he was like, stop worrying about the planet and go save souls. And a part of me was that just seems, you can't say that out loud. And I was he's kind of right. That doesn't mean that as a Christian, I need to be I'm going to go pollute or not care about the world. But it means at its, what he's right about, and I don't even know if he understands it. What he is right about is the world isn't going to get better because we managed to slow the polar ice caps melting. The world is going to get better when human beings live the way Jesus called them to live.
Yep.
And they're not going to do that unless they become disciples of Jesus. And honestly, I think by becoming disciples of Jesus, maybe they'll care more about the world God told them to take care of. But ultimately, our mission is not to end world hunger. It's to help people become like Jesus, because in becoming like Jesus, they'll actually love their neighbor and share their food. like all of the things that we're trying to fix have their roots in the fact that we're broken and Jesus wants to fix us. So we become the kind of humans that love each other and like, let's stop war. Well, then we need to help people become like Jesus, who told us to love our enemies and stop fighting. Right. So the mission, like, it starts with the soul. It starts with the human being becoming someone else. And that is what we were called to. So there was a part that was like, he's right.
Yeah.
Churches get so obsessed with some of this stuff, not because it is good stuff, but when we miss the heart, which is the issue, the heart is the issue.
Yeah.
That is what needs to change. And that's what God has called us on a mission to.
It's just that notion of keep the main thing the main thing.
Yeah.
And Jesus said, this is the main thing. That's why we call it the Great Commission, both scope and involvement.
You've brought the whole thing back. Look at that.
That's called inclusio.
But
I learned that in seminary.
Nobody
Remember
remembers it 'cause it was 40 minutes ago.
Yeah. So, hey, let's wrap this one up. Thanks for joining with us. This coming Sunday will be the final installment of the commission, and Robert's going to be doing that. And then next week, we're going to put Robert and Pete on the same podcast on this topic, because I think that's going to be fun.
Next week?
I think, oh, yes. Are you here?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, you're here? Okay, yeah, next week. So it's going to be a good one. I can't wait. I'll still be on vacation for one day, and I'll just get to listen to it. But it'll be great. And then we will kick off a brand new series the following week. So
cool.
Thanks for joining with us, and we'll see you next time on Digging Deeper.
See you guys.